Thank you for being a valued supporter of the 10X podcast group. Your dedication means the world to us. Today, we bring you a gripping tale titled, The Perfect Heist. Your continued support and subscription fuel our passion for storytelling, and we deeply appreciate every moment you spend with us. So without further ado, let's dive into today's compelling narrative. Chapter 1. Assemble the Team. Gabriel Archer sat in the shadowed corner of the dimly lit bar, his fingers tracing the rim of a nearly empty glass of whiskey. His sharp gray eyes scanned the room, pausing momentarily on the flickering neon sign outside the window. To an observer, he looked like just another man nursing a drink, but his mind was spinning a web of plans so intricate that even he wasn't sure if they'd hold together. This wasn't just another job. It was the job. Gabe leaned back as a figure slid into the seat across from him. A woman mid-30s, with auburn hair tied into a sleek ponytail. She placed a laptop bag beside her, her eyes scanning him with cool detachment. "Sophie," Gabe greeted, his voice calm but firm. "Thanks for coming." "I'm here because you said it's worth my time," Sophie Kane replied, her tone clipped. "If this is another one of your wild ideas, I'm out." Gabe allowed a small smile. Sophie had always been sharp, her hacking skills unmatched. She didn't take risks lightly. "It's not wild, it's precise. And it's worth millions." Sophie's brow arched slightly, but before she could respond, a third figure approached the table. Marcus "Brick" Johnson was as solid as his nickname suggested, his broad shoulders and towering frame making him an imposing presence even in the casual attire he wore. Brick didn't bother with pleasantries. "If this is a waste of time, I'll walk right back out that door." "It's not," Gabe said simply. "Let's wait for one more." Brick crossed his arms, his expression skeptical. Sophie busied herself with her phone, tapping away as if Gabe's pitch wasn't worth her attention. Minutes stretched until the final arrival appeared, a lean man in a leather jacket, his sharp blue eyes scanning the bar as he approached. Liam Novak moved with the precision of a predator, every step calculated. "Gabe." Liam slid into a chair, his voice low. "Let's hear it." Gabe nodded and reached for the folder at his side. He placed it on the table and opened it to reveal a detailed schematic of Concordia International Bank. The air around the table shifted immediately, the weight of what they were about to discuss settling on their shoulders. "This is Concordia," Gabe began. "The most secure bank in the state. Inside that vault sits over $30 million in cash and high-value assets." Brick let out a low whistle. Sophie frowned, her fingers pausing mid-tap. Liam leaned in, his interest piqued. "And you think we can take it?" Sophie asked, her tone skeptical. "We can," Gabe replied, his voice steady. "But we can't do it alone. That's why I've brought someone else onto the team." Brick's eyes narrowed. "Who?" Gabe glanced at the entrance of the bar. "She'll be here any minute." As if on cue, the door creaked open, and Elena Vega walked in. She was a striking figure, her tailored black coat and confident stride immediately drawing attention. Her dark eyes seemed to pierce through the room as she approached, her lips curving into a faint, enigmatic smile. "Elena Vega," Gabe introduced as she joined the table. "She's not just any con artist. She's a behavioral manipulator." Elena extended a hand, but her gaze lingered on each of them in turn, as if reading their thoughts. Brick didn't take her hand, his posture stiff. Sophie barely glanced at her. Liam, however, shook it, his smile polite but guarded. "A manipulator?" Sophie asked, her voice edged with doubt. "What does that even mean?" "It means I understand people," Elena replied smoothly, her voice carrying a faint accent that hinted at her international past. "Their desires, their fears. I make them trust me, and then I use that trust to get what I need." Brick snorted. "Sounds like a fancy way of saying liar." Elena's smile didn't falter. "Call it what you want. The difference is, I'm very, very good at it." Gabe cut in before the tension could escalate. "We need her. Concordia's staff is the first line of defense. Security protocols are tight, but they're run by humans. Humans who make mistakes." Sophie folded her arms. "And you think she can make them?" "I don't think," Gabe replied. "I know." Elena leaned forward, her gaze locking onto Sophie's. "I'll prove myself. But let's be clear, I don't work for free. My cut is non-negotiable." "And what's your cut?" Liam asked. 20%. The table erupted in protests. Brick slammed his hand on the table, drawing the attention of nearby patrons. Gabe raised his hands to calm them. Enough, Gabe barked. Elena's skills will make or break this job. She's worth it. Brick scowled but said nothing. Sophie looked unimpressed, but Liam gave a small nod, signaling his reluctant agreement. Elena sat back, her smile faint but triumphant. Then let's get to work. Gabe closed the folder. We meet tomorrow for Phase 1. Study the schematics. Sophie, start digging into the bank's network. Brick, I need you to assess our equipment needs. Liam, plan out the logistics. And Elena. I know what to do, Elena interrupted, her confidence unwavering. As the group dispersed, Gabe remained seated, his mind racing. He had assembled the best team he could find, but doubts gnawed at the edges of his thoughts. The heist was risky, and trust among thieves was a fragile thing. Elena lingered for a moment, her dark eyes meeting his. You've taken a gamble bringing me in. I take calculated risks, Gabe replied. She smiled faintly. Let's hope your calculations are right. With that, she walked out, leaving Gabe alone with his thoughts. The pieces were in place, but the game had just begun. Chapter 2. Infiltration begins. Elena Vega had prepared for this moment her entire life. The polished facade of Concordia International Bank loomed before her, an unyielding fortress of wealth and security. For most, the idea of penetrating such a stronghold was unthinkable. For Elena, it was an invitation. She stepped through the revolving doors, a smile poised on her lips. Inside, the bank bustled with activity. Tellers assisting customers, security guards patrolling discreetly, and executives in tailored suits briskly walking to and from meetings. Every detail, the cold marble floors, the faint scent of disinfectant, the low hum of conversations, painted a picture of control. But Elena knew better. Every fortress had its cracks. She was here to find them. Her first target was the bank staff. People with the weakest link in any security system. And Elena was a master at exploiting them. Today, her mission was simple. Establish her role and begin building trust. The interview. Elena sat across from a panel of 3 executives, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Each member of the panel exuded authority. Richard Hayes, the no-nonsense head of operations, Cynthia Mathers, a sharp-eyed HR director, and Nathan Cross, the bank's head of security, whose penetrating gaze felt like an interrogation all on its own. Elena Vega, Richard began, scanning her resume. Your background is impressive. Finance, international markets, fluency in multiple languages. Why Concordia? Elena tilted her head slightly, allowing a faint smile. After years of working abroad, I wanted to return to my roots. Concordia represents everything I value in a workplace: integrity, innovation, and excellence. When I saw the opportunity, I knew it was where I belonged. Nathan leaned back, his expression unreadable. And your previous employer? Why leave? The question was expected, and Elena answered smoothly, layering her response with just enough vulnerability to appear genuine. It was a wonderful experience, but I needed a change. The long hours and constant travel took their toll. I wanted a position where I could grow, both personally and professionally. Cynthia nodded approvingly. Richard looked satisfied. Nathan, however, remained silent, his sharp eyes fixed on her. Well, Ms. Vega, Richard said after a moment, we believe you'd be an excellent fit. Welcome to Concordia. First impressions. Elena's first days at the bank were calculated but unremarkable. She introduced herself warmly to colleagues, remembered names, and made mental notes of every detail that might prove useful. She knew how to blend in, becoming just likable enough to be memorable but not suspicious. Her charm worked quickly. By the end of the week, the receptionist confided in her about office gossip, a junior manager complained to her about his workload, and even the stoic head of IT cracked a smile when she complimented his tie. Each interaction was a thread in the web she was weaving. But Nathan Cross remained an enigma. He watched her with a quiet intensity that made her skin prickle. While others saw a helpful new colleague, Nathan saw a puzzle, and he intended to solve it. The safe house. Elena arrived at the team's safe house late that evening, her heels clicking softly against the floor. Gabe was seated at the dining table, poring over schematics. Sophie was at her laptop, her fingers flying over the keyboard, while Brick cleaned a weapon with methodical precision. Liam, as usual, leaned against the wall, observing. Well? Gabe asked, not looking up. I'm in, Elena replied, slipping off her coat and draping it over a chair. Client Relations Officer. Access to key personnel. A front row seat to their operations. Sophie snorted. Congratulations. Now the real work begins. Brick leaned back against the wall, arms crossed. How long until they trust you? Elena smirked. They already do. Give me a week, and I'll know everything there is to know about this place. Gabe nodded, his expression unreadable. Good. But keep your guard up. Nathan Cross isn't just head of security. He's paranoid. He'll be watching you. I'm counting on it, Elena replied, her voice calm but firm. People like Nathan always think they're the smartest person in the room. That's their weakness. Brick muttered something under his breath, and Sophie rolled her eyes. But Gabe's gaze lingered on Elena, a flicker of doubt crossing his face. Trust, after all, was a fragile thing. Chapter 3. Cracks in the Plan. 2 weeks into her position at Concordia, Elena had achieved what few could, complete assimilation. She was no longer an outsider. Staff greeted her warmly, shared inside jokes, and sought her out for advice. But the deeper she embedded herself, the more she realized how precarious her position truly was. Tension at the safe house. The safe house had become a pressure cooker of mistrust and frustration. Gabe stood at the table, his fingers tracing the blueprints of the bank's security system. Sophie's laptop emitted a steady hum as she worked on breaching Concordia's firewalls. Brick cleaned his gun in silence, his presence as heavy as his frame. We've got a problem, Sophie announced, breaking the silence. The bank upgraded its security protocols. The firewall's been reinforced, and they've added new surveillance measures. When did this happen? Gabe asked sharply. This week, Sophie replied, her tone clipped. It's almost like they're expecting something. Brick frowned. Could it be a coincidence? Sophie scoffed. Not a chance. Someone tipped them off. Gabe's jaw tightened. Elena didn't mention anything about this. Maybe she doesn't know, Liam offered, exhaling a puff of smoke. She's not omniscient. Or maybe she does know, Sophie countered, her eyes narrowing. And she's playing us. Brick looked up from his weapon. She's a manipulator. It's what she does. She's part of the team, Gabe said, his tone firm. Until we have proof, we stick to the plan. Sophie's fingers resumed their dance across the keyboard, but her expression betrayed her doubt. Trust, it seemed, was in short supply. The bank. Elena sat across from Steve, a junior manager with a penchant for gossip. She had spent the past week carefully cultivating his trust, dropping just enough hints of vulnerability to make him feel special. Today, she would reap the rewards. So Steve, Elena began, her tone casual. What happens if someone tries to access the vault without authorization? Steve chuckled. They'd be screwed. The place goes into lockdown in seconds. Alarms, security protocols, the works. That's impressive, Elena said, leaning in slightly. But what if someone needs to override the system? Steve hesitated, clearly enjoying the attention. There's a manual override. Only a few people know about it. Me, Nathan, and a couple of execs. Elena's smile widened imperceptibly. Wow, Steve. That's a lot of responsibility. Yeah, Steve said, puffing up his chest. But someone's gotta do it. As Steve continued to ramble, Elena mentally filed away the information. The manual override was a critical piece of the puzzle, and now it was hers. Nathan Cross. In his office, Nathan reviewed hours of security footage, his sharp eyes scrutinizing every interaction. Elena Vega intrigued him. She was efficient, personable, and almost too perfect. He rewound the footage, watching her conversations with staff. Her charm was undeniable, but there was something calculated about her. Nathan tapped his pen against the desk, his mind racing. He decided it was time to dig deeper into Elena Vega's past. A warning. That night, Elena sat alone in her apartment, reviewing her notes. Her phone buzzed, and she picked it up to see an anonymous message. We know what you're doing. Watch your back. Her stomach tightened, but her expression remained calm. She deleted the message and returned to her notes. Fear was a luxury she couldn't afford. The game was becoming more dangerous, but Elena Vega was not one to back down. She smiled faintly, her dark eyes glinting with resolve. Let them watch. This was her game, and she intended to win. Chapter 4. The Unexpected Variable. The safe house was quiet, the kind of stillness that marked the calm before a storm. Gabe sat at the table, his brow furrowed as he studied the latest notes from Elena. The manual override she'd uncovered was a critical breakthrough, but something gnawed at him, an unease he couldn't quite place. Across the room, Sophie leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching him. "You trust her too much," she said, her voice low but firm. Gabe glanced up, his gray eyes narrowing. "She's done everything we've asked." "That doesn't mean she's on our side," Sophie shot back. "She's hiding something." Brick, perched on the edge of the couch, let out a grunt. "We're all hiding something. Comes with the territory." Liam smirked from his spot by the window, the faint glow of his cigarette illuminating his face. "Brick's got a point. None of us are saints here." Sophie rolled her eyes. "This isn't about morals. It's about risk. Elena's the wild card, and we're betting everything on her." Gabe closed the notebook with a sharp snap. "We've already made our choice. Doubting her now won't help." Sophie didn't respond, but the tension between them lingered, thick and suffocating. At Concordia, Elena sat in the staff break room, sipping a cup of coffee as she listened to two junior managers gossip about an upcoming audit. Their voices faded into background noise as her mind worked through her next move. The manual override was a significant find, but she needed more. Details about the bank's daily operations, guard rotations, and weaknesses in the schedule. Her thoughts were interrupted when Nathan Cross entered the room. His presence was magnetic, commanding attention without effort. He poured himself a cup of coffee and leaned against the counter, his sharp eyes fixed on her. "Elena," he said, his tone casual but probing. "How are you settling in?" She smiled warmly. "Very well, thank you. Everyone's been so welcoming." Nathan nodded, his gaze never wavering. "You've made quite an impression. Steve won't stop singing your praises." Elena laughed lightly. "Steve's been very kind." "I'm sure he has," Nathan replied, his tone shifting. "Tell me, Elena, what's your take on Concordia so far? Anything stand out to you?" Elena tilted her head, pretending to think. "It's incredibly efficient. Everything runs like clockwork. Honestly, I'm impressed." Nathan's lips curved into a faint smile, but his eyes remained calculating. "Efficiency is key in a place like this. But it also means there's no room for mistakes." "Of course," Elena said, meeting his gaze evenly. "Mistakes can be costly." Nathan held her gaze for a moment longer before nodding. "Exactly. Well, enjoy your coffee." As he left the room, Elena exhaled slowly. Nathan was circling her like a predator, testing her, searching for cracks. She'd expected as much, but it was still unnerving. She needed to be perfect. One slip, and everything would fall apart. A new obstacle. Later that evening, Elena met with the team at the safe house. Gabe greeted her with a nod, but Sophie's eyes were colder than usual. "Got anything new?" Gabe asked. Elena placed her notebook on the table. "They're conducting an internal audit next week. It's a routine check, but it means security will be tighter than usual. We'll need to adjust the timeline." Sophie snorted. "Convenient, isn't it? Right when we're about to move forward." Elena's eyes narrowed. "You think I orchestrated an audit?" "I think you're too good to be true," Sophie shot back. "You walk in, charm everyone, and suddenly you're their favorite employee. It doesn't add up." Gabe raised a hand, silencing them. "Enough. We don't have time for this." Sophie glared at Elena but said nothing more. Brick shifted uncomfortably, while Liam watched with mild amusement, his cigarette smoldering between his fingers. Elena leaned forward, her voice calm but firm. "I'm not your enemy, Sophie. If I fail, we all fail. So maybe save the accusations for someone who deserves them." Sophie's jaw tightened, but she didn't respond. Gabe looked between them, his expression unreadable. "Let's focus," he said. "We've got work to do." The twist. As the team worked through their revised plan, Elena's phone buzzed in her pocket. She glanced at the screen and frowned. The message was anonymous. "They're watching you. Be careful." Her heart raced, but she kept her expression neutral. She slipped the phone back into her pocket, her mind racing. Who was watching her? Nathan? The bank? Or someone else entirely? She excused herself to the bathroom, locking the door behind her. Staring at her reflection in the mirror, she took a deep breath. The stakes were higher than ever, and the game was becoming increasingly dangerous. But she couldn't afford to falter. Not now. When she returned to the group, she found Gabe watching her closely. His sharp gray eyes seemed to see through her, as if sensing her unease. She forced a smile, but his expression didn't soften. "The timeline's tight," Gabe said, his voice low. "We can't afford any more surprises." "Agreed," Elena replied, her tone steady despite the storm brewing inside her. But deep down, she knew the surprises were just beginning. Chapter 5. Into the Lion's Den. The day began like any other at Concordia International Bank, but Elena Vega sensed the shift in the air. Nathan Cross had grown more vigilant, and the upcoming audit had the entire staff on edge. It was the perfect storm, tensions high, movement scrutinized, and every mistake amplified. For Elena, this was both a challenge and an opportunity. Chaos, after all, was where she thrived. The first move. Elena entered the lobby, her usual composed demeanor masking the whirlwind of calculations in her mind. She stopped briefly at the receptionist's desk, flashing a warm smile. "Morning, Sandra," Elena said, handing over a cup of coffee she'd picked up on her way in. "Thought you could use this." Sandra's face lit up. "Elena, you're a lifesaver." "Thank you." Elena lingered just long enough to exchange pleasantries before moving toward her office. The coffee was more than a gesture. It was a subtle nudge, a reinforcement of trust. Everyone in the bank was a piece of the puzzle, and Elena needed them all positioned perfectly. Testing the waters. During her lunch break, Elena made her way to the security office under the pretense of delivering a misplaced package. Nathan was inside, poring over a set of surveillance feeds. "I hope I'm not interrupting," she said, holding up the small box. "This was left at my desk. Looks like it belongs to you." Nathan glanced up, his expression neutral. "Thanks. Just leave it on the counter." Elena stepped inside, placing the package down carefully. Her eyes flicked to the monitors, taking in the various angles of the bank. She knew better than to linger, but the brief glimpse was enough to confirm what she suspected. Nathan had increased the number of active cameras in the lobby and vault areas. "You're really doubling down on security, huh?" she said casually, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. Nathan's gaze sharpened. "It's a precaution. The audit always brings out the worst in people." "Smart," Elena replied with a nod. "Better safe than sorry." Nathan said nothing, his eyes returning to the screens. Sensing she'd overstayed her welcome, Elena excused herself and left. As the door clicked shut behind her, she exhaled softly. Nathan was becoming a problem. If she wasn't careful, he could unravel everything. The safe house. That evening, Elena returned to the safe house, where the team was already gathered. Gabe stood by the table, studying a revised version of the bank schematics. Sophie was at her laptop, Brick was cleaning a pistol, and Liam lounged on the couch, spinning a set of car keys in his hand. "Well?" Gabe asked as Elena entered. She placed her bag on the table. "Nathan's ramping up security. More cameras, tighter patrols. He's nervous. Or he's on to us," Sophie muttered without looking up. Elena ignored her. "The audit's creating tension among the staff. People are stressed, distracted. It's the perfect time to exploit weaknesses." Brick leaned back, his expression skeptical. "And how do we do that?" Elena pulled out a notebook, flipping to a page filled with neatly written notes. "There's a pattern to their movements. Nathan's focusing most of his attention on the vault, which means other areas are vulnerable. We can use that." Sophie frowned, her fingers pausing mid-type. "You're suggesting we create a diversion?" "Exactly," Elena replied. "Something that pulls Nathan and his team away from the vault." "And what happens when Nathan figures it out?" Sophie countered. "Because he will." Elena met her gaze, her voice calm but firm. "By the time he does, it'll be too late." Sophie shook her head, but Gabe held up a hand. "She's right. The more pressure we put on him, the more mistakes he'll make." Elena's lips curved into a faint smile. "Exactly. People under pressure are predictable. Nathan's no exception." The setup. The following day, Elena put the next phase of the plan into motion. During a routine meeting with a group of managers, she subtly planted seeds of doubt, hinting that the audit might uncover discrepancies in the security budget. The managers, already on edge, began whispering among themselves, their paranoia growing. By the end of the day, rumors of potential cutbacks had spread through the staff like wildfire. Nathan, overhearing the chatter, grew increasingly frustrated. His focus split between maintaining order and preparing for the audit. Elena observed it all with quiet satisfaction. The cracks were forming, and it was only a matter of time before the entire structure began to crumble. A new threat. That evening, Elena received another anonymous message. Your secrets won't stay buried. Watch your step. Her heart raced as she stared at the words, the implications sinking in. Someone was targeting her. But who? The team? Nathan? Or someone from her past? She deleted the message and sat down, forcing herself to think clearly. Fear was the enemy, and she refused to let it control her. She would play her role, manipulate the players, and stay one step ahead. She had no other choice. The confrontation. Later that night, Elena found herself alone with Gabe at the safe house. The others had retired to their rooms, leaving the two of them in the dimly lit living room. You're quiet tonight, Gabe said, studying her. Elena shrugged, feigning nonchalance. Just tired. Gabe didn't respond immediately, his eyes searching hers. You've been solid so far, but Sophie's not wrong. There's more to you than you're letting on. Elena's smile faltered, but she quickly recovered. You're right. There is more. But if you knew everything, you'd never trust me. Gabe's expression darkened. And why should I trust you now? Because you don't have a choice, Elena said, her voice soft but unyielding. You brought me in for a reason. If you doubt me now, you'll undermine everything we've built. Gabe leaned back, his jaw tightening. Just don't give me a reason to regret it. Elena met his gaze, her own steady and unreadable. I won't. But even as she spoke, doubt swirled in her mind. The game was growing more dangerous by the hour, and she was walking a razor-thin line between loyalty and betrayal. One wrong move, and it would all come crashing down. Chapter 6. Double Cross. The weight of distrust in the air at the safe house was palpable. The team, once aligned on their singular mission, now moved like pieces on a fragmented chessboard, each guarding their own secrets. Elena Vega was the queen, elusive and powerful, yet under constant scrutiny. The cracks were widening. It was only a matter of time before something, or someone, shattered. The heist approaches. Gabe called a meeting the next evening. The safe house buzzed with a nervous energy as the team gathered around the dining table. Sophie's laptop screen glowed faintly, displaying a meticulously planned sequence of events. Brick leaned back in his chair, his massive frame casting long shadows across the room, while Liam sat with his usual air of nonchalance, spinning a coin between his fingers. This is it, Gabe began, his voice steady but charged. We hit Concordia in 3 days. Sophie frowned. With Nathan breathing down everyone's neck? It's risky. Riskier to wait, Gabe replied. The audit's already stretching them thin. We use that to our advantage. Elena leaned forward, her hands clasped on the table. The staff's distracted, and Nathan's focus is split. This is the window we've been waiting for. Sophie shot her a sharp look. If your intel is solid. Elena didn't flinch. It is. Gabe held up a hand, silencing any further argument. Stick to your roles. Sophie, make sure the systems are ready to bypass the alarms. Brick, secure the equipment. Liam, finalize the getaway route. Elena. I know, Elena interrupted. I'll handle the manual override. Her calm confidence filled the room, but beneath it, she could feel the weight of their distrust. She didn't blame them. In their world, suspicion was survival. The warning. That night, as the team dispersed to their tasks, Elena lingered in the living room. Gabe was the last to leave, pausing at the doorway. You sure you're ready for this? He asked, his voice low. Elena met his gaze, her expression unreadable. I was ready the day I walked into that bank. Gabe studied her for a moment longer before nodding. Good. Because if you're not, we all go down. After he left, Elena sank into the couch, her thoughts racing. Her phone buzzed, and she hesitated before picking it up. Another anonymous message flashed across the screen. You're playing a dangerous game. Don't forget whose side you're on. Her chest tightened as she read the words. The messages were escalating, their tone more ominous. Someone knew more than they should. But who? Nathan Cross's plan. At Concordia, Nathan Cross stood in the dimly lit security office, his arms crossed as he reviewed the latest footage. Elena Vega's face appeared on the screen, smiling as she interacted with staff. On the surface she seemed perfect. Too perfect. Nathan's instincts had kept him alive in this business for years. And his instincts screamed that something was off. "Pull up her personnel file," Nathan said to his assistant, Jessica. Jessica hesitated. "Is something wrong, sir?" Nathan didn't look at her. His eyes remained on the screen. "Just a hunch." As the file loaded, Nathan scanned the information, his sharp eyes catching every detail. Education, previous employment, references, it all checked out. But it was too clean, too seamless. Nobody's life was without rough edges. "Dig deeper," Nathan ordered. "Background checks, financial records, everything. I want to know who Elena Vega really is." The first signs of betrayal. 2 days before the heist, Elena arrived at the bank to find Nathan waiting for her in the lobby. His expression was calm, but his eyes were sharp, dissecting her every move. "Elena," he said, his tone neutral. "Can we talk?" "Of course," she replied smoothly, masking her unease. He led her to his office, gesturing for her to sit. Elena kept her posture relaxed, though her mind raced. "I wanted to thank you for your hard work," Nathan began, leaning against his desk. "You've been a valuable addition to the team." "Thank you," Elena said, her smile polite. Nathan's eyes narrowed slightly. "But I can't shake the feeling that there's more to you than meets the eye." Elena's heart skipped a beat, but she maintained her composure. "I'm not sure what you mean." Nathan's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I've been doing this job long enough to know when someone's hiding something. You're good, Elena. But nobody's perfect." She tilted her head, her expression curious. "Are you accusing me of something?" Nathan held her gaze, the tension in the room thick. "Not yet." Elena forced herself to laugh lightly. "You have quite the imagination, Nathan. If I didn't know better, I'd say you were trying to intimidate me." Nathan didn't respond, his silence more unsettling than words. After a long moment, he nodded. "Just doing my job." As Elena left his office, her calm facade cracked for the briefest moment. Nathan was closing in, and time was running out. A new player. That night, back at the safe house, Gabe called the team together. His expression was darker than usual, his jaw clenched as he tossed a folder onto the table. "What's this?" Brick asked, picking it up. "Surveillance photos," Gabe replied. "Someone's been following us." The photos showed each member of the team in various locations. Sophie entering a coffee shop, Liam at a gas station, Brick loading equipment into a van. The final photo was of Elena, standing outside the bank. "Who the hell took these?" Sophie demanded, her voice sharp. Gabe shook his head. "I don't know. But whoever it is, they know what we're planning." Brick's fists clenched. "Could be law enforcement. Or worse." Sophie's eyes flicked to Elena. "Or it could be her." Elena met her gaze evenly. "If I were working against you, why would I still be here?" "To keep tabs on us," Sophie shot back. "To feed information to whoever's after us." "Enough," Gabe said, his voice cutting through the tension. He looked at Elena. "Can you prove you're not involved?" Elena's jaw tightened. "I shouldn't have to. But if you want proof, fine. I'll find out who's behind this." The room fell into uneasy silence. The team's unity was unraveling, and the heist was teetering on the edge of disaster. The choice. Later that night, Elena sat alone in her room, her mind racing. The messages, the surveillance, Nathan's growing suspicion. It was all coming to a head. She knew she had to make a choice. Double down on the team, or cut her losses and walk away. But walking away wasn't an option. Not yet. Not until the game was hers to win. Elena stared out the window, her reflection staring back at her. The lines were blurring, and the stakes had never been higher. All she could do now was stay one step ahead and hope the cracks didn't consume her before she reached the finish line. Chapter 7. The Heist. The day had arrived. The team had spent months planning, weeks preparing, and days questioning everything. Now, with the final pieces in place, there was no turning back. The heist wasn't just about money anymore. It was about survival, trust, and staying ahead of the shadows that loomed over them. The calm before the storm. At the safe house, the atmosphere was heavy. The team sat in silence, the weight of what lay ahead pressing down on them. Gabe stood at the center of the room, the leader of a group bound together by necessity rather than loyalty. "All right," he began, his voice steady. "Let's run through it one last time." Sophie, seated with her laptop open, gestured to the screen. "I'll be stationed here, remotely disabling the alarms and controlling the security feed. I'll create a 30-second blackout window at 11:47 a.m. That's all you'll have to breach the vault." Brick nodded. "I'll handle the entry. The equipment's ready, and the route's clear." Liam leaned back in his chair, spinning his car keys. "The van's prepped. Once we're in the wind, I've got 3 alternate routes mapped out." Gabe turned to Elena, who sat calmly at the edge of the table. "And you?" Elena's gaze didn't waver. "I'll activate the manual override from inside the bank. It'll disable the vault's secondary locking system and buy us the time we need." The plan was airtight on paper, but they all knew the reality would be messier, more dangerous. Gabe's sharp eyes swept over the group. "We move as one. No improvising, no second-guessing. We succeed or fail together." Sophie muttered under her breath. "If we don't kill each other first." The infiltration. Elena arrived at the bank that morning like any other day, her demeanor composed. Her position inside Concordia was critical. Without her, the team would be flying blind. As she walked through the lobby, her heels clicking softly on the marble floor, she exchanged polite greetings with staff. But her focus was razor-sharp, every movement calculated. She'd memorized the timing of the guards' rotations, the blind spots in the security cameras, and the patterns of her co-workers. At 11:30 a.m., she slipped into the security office under the pretense of delivering a file. Nathan Cross was there, as she'd expected, monitoring the feeds. "Morning," she said with a smile. Nathan glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "Elena, what can I do for you?" "Just dropping this off," she replied, placing the file on his desk. Nathan's eyes lingered on her for a moment before returning to the monitors. "Busy day ahead." "Isn't it always?" she said lightly, masking the tension that coiled in her chest. She left the office without incident, but her pulse quickened. Nathan was sharp, and she could feel his suspicion like a blade at her back. The first move. At exactly 11:45 a.m., Sophie initiated the first phase of the heist. From her laptop at the safe house, she began disabling the bank's external security systems. The alarms were rerouted to a dummy server, and the surveillance feeds looped on a 10-second delay. "Brick, you're up," Sophie said over the comms. Outside the bank, Brick and Gabe waited in an unmarked van. Brick hefted a duffel bag filled with tools and explosives, his expression grim. "On it." He exited the van and made his way to the service entrance, where he began cutting through the reinforced lock. Every second felt like an eternity, but by 11:47 a.m., the door was open. "Entry secured," Brick reported. The vault. Inside the bank, Elena moved with practiced ease. She slipped into a restricted hallway, her badge granting her access. Reaching the manual override panel, she took a deep breath and began entering the code she'd memorized. As she worked, her calm crackled to life. "Elena," Gabe's voice came through, low and urgent. "We're in position." "Status?" 30 seconds, she replied, her voice steady despite the tension gripping her. The override required multiple authorizations, each with a unique code. Elena input the final sequence just as Sophie's blackout window began. The system beeped, and the secondary locks on the vault disengaged. "It's done," Elena said, stepping back from the panel. "Good work," Gabe replied. "Brick, get that vault open." The twist. As Brick worked on the vault, the tension in the bank escalated. Nathan, watching the monitors, noticed something unusual. The cameras in the lobby were looping, a detail almost imperceptible to the untrained eye. But Nathan's instincts screamed that something was wrong. He grabbed his radio. "All units, status check." Elena, still in the restricted hallway, heard the call. Her heart raced as she realized Nathan was catching on faster than expected. "Gabe," she said into the comms, her voice low. "We've got a problem." "Nathan's on alert." "We're almost done," Gabe replied. "Hold your position." Elena bit her lip, weighing her options. She could stay and risk being caught, or she could move, drawing attention away from the vault. Her decision was made in a heartbeat. The decoy. Elena stepped into the main hallway, her face a mask of calm. She intercepted Nathan near the lobby, her voice light as she greeted him. "Nathan, is everything okay?" Nathan's sharp eyes locked onto hers. "We've got a glitch in the system." "What are you doing here?" Heading to the break room, Elena lied smoothly. Do you need help? Nathan frowned, clearly suspicious. No. Go back to your desk. Elena nodded and walked away, her heart pounding. She could feel Nathan's eyes on her, but she didn't look back. The escape. In the vault, Brick and Gabe worked quickly, loading bags of cash and valuables. Sophie's voice crackled in their ears. You've got 2 minutes before the loop ends. Move it. Brick hauled the last bag onto his shoulder. Let's go. The team exited the vault, moving with precision through the service corridors. Liam was waiting outside with the van, the engine running. Go, go, go. Gabe ordered as they piled in. As the van sped away, Elena emerged from the bank, blending seamlessly into the crowd. She removed her earpiece and slipped it into her pocket, her face betraying no emotion. Aftermath. Back at the safe house, the team regrouped, the tension finally breaking as they counted their haul. Gabe's expression was grim but satisfied. We did it. Sophie, however, wasn't celebrating. She looked at Elena, her eyes narrowing. Nathan's no fool. He'll figure it out. He already has, Elena replied, her voice calm. But by the time he pieces it together, we'll be long gone. The room fell silent, the weight of her words sinking in. They had pulled off the heist, but the danger was far from over. Nathan Cross wasn't the kind of man to let something like this go unanswered. And as the shadows of betrayal loomed closer, the team knew their fight for survival was just beginning. Chapter 8. The Betrayal. The safe house was thick with tension. The heist had been successful, but the victory felt hollow. Trust among the team had reached its breaking point, and the specter of Nathan Cross's relentless pursuit hung over them like a storm cloud. The fallout. Gabe stood at the center of the room, counting the haul. Brick sat nearby, his massive frame slouched in exhaustion. Liam leaned against the wall, spinning a coin between his fingers, while Sophie sat at her laptop, her eyes glued to the screen. Elena watched from the corner, her posture relaxed but her mind racing. We made it, Gabe said, though his tone lacked celebration. He looked at each member of the team in turn. But we're not out of the woods. Sophie snorted. Understatement of the century. Nathan's probably tearing the bank apart right now. It's only a matter of time before he tracks us. We knew this wouldn't be easy, Gabe replied. No, Sophie said, her eyes narrowing as she looked at Elena. But it didn't have to feel like we were flying blind. Elena met Sophie's glare with calm detachment. We got in and out. The plan worked. Barely, Sophie shot back. And you were a little too comfortable playing both sides. Brick stirred, his deep voice cutting through the tension. What's that supposed to mean? Sophie pointed at Elena. She's been feeding Nathan breadcrumbs this whole time, keeping him just suspicious enough to focus on her and not the rest of us. Gabe's expression darkened. Is that true? Elena's gaze flicked to him, her calm exterior finally cracking. Of course not. I did what I had to do to keep Nathan off our backs. Did you? Sophie pressed. Because it seems like you were more interested in playing your own game. Elena stood, her voice icy. You think I'd risk everything for some imaginary double-cross? If I hadn't kept Nathan distracted, we wouldn't be here right now. That's convenient, Sophie replied. But I'm not buying it. Liam, who had been silent until now, interjected with a smirk. Ladies, can we save the drama for after we're clear? We've got bigger problems. Nathan Cross's next move. At Concordia, Nathan Cross stood in the bank security office, the aftermath of the heist displayed across every monitor. Guards scrambled to assess the damage, but Nathan's focus was elsewhere. He replayed the footage of Elena's final moments in the bank, her calm demeanor, her perfectly timed movements. She's the key, Nathan muttered to himself. Jessica, his assistant, looked up from her desk. Sir, get me everything we have on Elena Vega, Nathan ordered. Her file, her background, her connections. I want to know who she is and where she's hiding. Jessica hesitated. You think she's involved? Nathan's eyes narrowed. I know she is. And I'm going to prove it. A shocking revelation. Back at the safe house, Sophie continued her work on the laptop, scanning news reports and monitoring the bank security systems. Suddenly, her screen froze, and a single message appeared. You're not as hidden as you think. What the hell? Sophie muttered, her fingers flying over the keyboard. What's wrong? Gabe asked, moving to her side. We've been compromised, Sophie replied, her voice tight. Someone's tracking us. Who? Brick demanded. Sophie shook her head. I don't know, but they're good. I'm trying to. Her screen went black, then flickered back to life with a new message. Elena Vega is not who she says she is. The room fell silent as everyone turned to Elena. Her face remained composed, but her hands clenched into fists at her sides. Explain, Gabe said, his voice low and dangerous. Elena took a step forward, her voice steady. I don't know who's sending those messages, but they're trying to divide us. Convenient excuse, Sophie said, rising from her chair. What aren't you telling us? Elena met Sophie's gaze, her dark eyes unwavering. What I haven't told you doesn't matter. What matters is that we have the money and a way out. Gabe's jaw tightened. You're not denying it. I don't have to, Elena replied, her voice sharp. You brought me in because I'm the best at what I do. If that's changed, then say it. The tension in the room was suffocating. Gabe's eyes searched hers, looking for something. Truth, perhaps, or the lack of it. Finally, he stepped back. Everyone calm down, he ordered. We don't have time for this. Sophie, keep monitoring. Brick, Liam, get the van ready. Elena. I know what to do, Elena interrupted. The trap. As the team prepared to leave the safe house, Gabe pulled Elena aside. I need to know I can trust you. Elena's expression softened, a rare crack in her armor. You can. But trust goes both ways. Gabe nodded, though the doubt lingered in his eyes. Then don't give me a reason to regret this. Elena didn't respond. She couldn't. There was too much at stake, too many lies tangled in the truth. As the team piled into the van, Elena glanced out the window, her mind racing. Nathan was closing in, Sophie was suspicious, and someone was feeding them messages designed to destroy them. The game had changed, and the stakes were higher than ever. But Elena Vega wasn't about to lose. Not yet. Not ever. Chapter 9. Catastrophe. The van sped through the city streets, weaving through traffic as the tension inside mirrored the chaos outside. The plan had been simple. Regroup at the secondary safe house and lay low until the heat died down. But nothing about this heist had gone as expected. Elena sat in the back seat, her gaze fixed on the road ahead. Gabe was beside her, his expression hard, while Brick drove with the focus of a soldier navigating a battlefield. Sophie was glued to her laptop, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she tried to salvage what remained of their anonymity. Liam, seated up front, kept his eyes on the side mirrors, scanning for tails. We've got a problem, Sophie announced, her voice tight. Nathan's tracking us. Gabe frowned. How? He's better than I gave him credit for, Sophie admitted. Either he's tapped into city surveillance, or someone's feeding him intel. All eyes turned to Elena. She met their gazes with unwavering calm. If I were working with him, you wouldn't have made it out of the bank. She's right, Brick grunted. Focus on the now. Sophie muttered something under her breath but returned to her screen. Nathan closes in. Back at Concordia, Nathan Cross leaned over a series of maps spread across his desk, his jaw clenched. Jessica stood nearby, phone in hand, relaying updates from the field. They've been spotted heading north, she reported. Nathan nodded, his mind racing. They'll go to ground soon. Focus on known safe houses and choke points. I want a team at every exit route. Do you think they'll split up? Jessica asked. Nathan's lips thinned. Not yet. They're too fractured to trust each other alone. But it's only a matter of time. He stared at the monitor displaying Elena Vega's photo. She's the key. If we can isolate her, the rest will fall apart. The ambush. As the van approached an underpass on the outskirts of the city, Liam tensed. Something's not right. Brick glanced at him. What do you mean? Too quiet, Liam replied. No cars, no pedestrians. It's like the place is cleared out. Before anyone could respond, the screech of tires echoed through the underpass. Black SUVs appeared on both sides, blocking their escape. Ambush! Gabe shouted. Brick slammed on the brakes, the van skidding to a halt. Men in tactical gear emerged from the SUVs, weapons drawn. Out of the van. One of them ordered through a megaphone. Elena's heart raced as the team exchanged panicked glances. We can't fight them, she said. Not like this. We're not surrendering, Gabe growled. Sophie grabbed her laptop and began frantically typing. Give me a minute. I can disable their comms. We don't have a minute, Brick said, pulling a handgun from under his seat. The first gunshot shattered the tense silence, and chaos erupted. Brick returned fire, using the van for cover as Liam grabbed a second weapon and joined him. Gabe pulled Elena and Sophie toward the back of the van, shielding them as bullets ricocheted off the metal. Elena's gamble. As the firefight raged, Elena's mind raced. This wasn't just a bust, it was an execution. Nathan wanted them alive, but whoever had sent the tactical team had no such intentions. She grabbed Gabe's arm. "We have to split up." "Are you insane?" Gabe snapped. "That's suicide." "Staying here is suicide," Elena countered. "We're sitting ducks. Let me create a distraction. You take the others and run." Gabe hesitated, his eyes searching hers. "Why would you do that?" "Because I can get out of this," Elena said, her voice firm. "You can't. Not all of you." Gabe's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Go." Without another word, Elena slipped out of the van, using the chaos as cover. She moved like a shadow, darting between columns and vehicles. Reaching one of the SUVs, she found an unconscious driver slumped over the steering wheel, courtesy of Brick's impeccable aim. She climbed into the vehicle and started the engine, slamming her foot on the gas. The sudden roar drew the attention of the tactical team, who turned their fire toward her. The team's escape. Gabe watched in stunned silence as Elena drove straight into the enemy line, drawing their fire. "Move!" he shouted, snapping the others out of their daze. Brick and Liam covered their retreat as Sophie clutched her laptop, her face pale. The group scrambled up a side embankment, disappearing into the surrounding woods. As they ran, Sophie looked back. "She's not coming back from that. She knows what she's doing," Gabe said, though his voice betrayed his doubt. Brick grunted. "She'd better. Otherwise, this was all for nothing." Elena's confrontation. Elena's SUV skidded to a stop as it collided with one of the tactical team's vehicles. The impact threw her forward, but she recovered quickly, grabbing a pistol from the glove compartment. She kicked open the door and stepped out, her weapon trained on the nearest figure. "Drop it," she shouted. The man hesitated, his gun lowering slightly. Before he could respond, a familiar voice cut through the chaos. "Elena." She turned to see Nathan Cross standing a few yards away, his own weapon holstered. His expression was calm, almost smug. "It's over," Nathan said. "You can't win." Elena smirked. "Winning's subjective." Nathan gestured to the men surrounding her. "You're surrounded. Drop the act." Elena's grip tightened on the pistol, but she didn't fire. Instead, she met Nathan's gaze, her dark eyes filled with defiance. "You don't know me as well as you think." Nathan took a step closer. "Maybe not. But I know enough to recognize a sinking ship when I see one. Help me, and I can protect you." Elena's laugh was cold. "I don't need your protection." Nathan's expression hardened. "Then you'll go down with the rest of them." Elena didn't respond. Instead, she raised her weapon, but not at Nathan. She aimed for the nearby fuel tank of a parked vehicle and fired. The explosion rocked the underpass, engulfing the area in flames and smoke. Using the chaos, Elena disappeared into the shadows, leaving Nathan shouting orders to his team. Aftermath. Hours later, the remaining members of the team regrouped at a temporary hideout. Gabe's face was etched with worry as he paced the room, Brick and Liam watching him in silence. Sophie sat with her laptop, trying to track any chatter about the heist. "She's not coming back," Sophie said finally. "She will," Gabe replied, though his voice lacked conviction. Brick shook his head. "She's either dead or gone for good. Either way, we've got bigger problems." Gabe stopped pacing, his fists clenching. "We stick to the plan. We split up, lay low, and regroup in a week." "And if Nathan finds us first?" Liam asked. Gabe's jaw tightened. "Then we fight." But even as he spoke, doubt gnawed at him. The heist had been their chance at freedom, but now it felt like a death sentence. And Elena, their wild card, their ace, was gone. For now. Chapter 10. The Final Gambit. The world had narrowed to shadows and whispers for the remnants of the team. Every creak of a floorboard, every unfamiliar face in a crowd, could mean discovery or death. With Elena gone, the unity of the group had dissolved into uneasy alliances. Gabe, as the leader, bore the brunt of the tension, but even his resolve was beginning to crack. The aftermath. The safe house was suffocatingly quiet. Gabe stood at the window, peering through a crack in the blinds. Brick sat at the table, cleaning his gun with slow, deliberate movements, while Sophie tapped furiously on her laptop, her face pale and drawn. "We can't stay here much longer," Sophie said, breaking the silence. "Nathan's resources are endless. It's only a matter of time before he finds us." Brick grunted. "Let him try." Gabe turned, his expression grim. "He won't come alone, and we can't fight a small army. We need to move." "Move where?" Sophie snapped. "Every exit route is being watched. Every safe house we've ever used is compromised. This isn't just a chase. It's a noose tightening around our necks." The room fell silent again, the weight of her words pressing down on them. Liam, leaning against the wall, finally spoke. "We need her," he said. All eyes turned to him. "Elena's the only one who can get us out of this," Liam continued. "She knows how Nathan thinks. She knows the system. Without her, we're dead." Sophie scoffed. "She's gone. She's either in custody or halfway to some tropical island with her cut." "She's not like that," Gabe said, though doubt flickered in his eyes. Sophie slammed her laptop shut. "You're still defending her? After everything?" "Enough," Gabe said sharply. "We're not doing this again." But the room's tension refused to dissipate. Without Elena, they were lost. And they all knew it. Elena's return. At midnight, a faint knock echoed through the safe house. Brick was on his feet in an instant, his gun drawn. Gabe signaled for silence, motioning the others to stay back as he approached the door. "Elena," he whispered. The knock came again, softer this time. Gabe opened the door a crack, his breath catching as he saw her. Elena stood on the threshold, her face streaked with soot and a faint bruise on her cheek. Her clothes were disheveled, and her usual composed demeanor was replaced by a raw, almost haunted look. "You look like hell," Gabe said, stepping aside to let her in. "Feel worse," Elena replied, her voice hoarse. Brick lowered his weapon but didn't relax. Sophie's expression was unreadable, though her tension was palpable. Liam simply nodded at Elena, a flicker of relief crossing his face. "What happened?" Gabe asked. Elena sank into a chair, her movements slow and deliberate. "Nathan's after me. I barely made it out alive." "Why come back?" Sophie asked, her tone sharp. "If you've been working with him, why not stay gone?" Elena's eyes locked onto Sophie's, dark and unyielding. "Because I never worked with him. And if we don't act now, none of us will survive." The plan. Over the next hour, Elena outlined her plan. Nathan's network was vast, but it wasn't flawless. She had identified a critical vulnerability, an encrypted server Nathan used to coordinate his operations. If they could access it, they could erase all traces of the team and divert Nathan's attention elsewhere. "It's risky," Sophie said, her skepticism clear. "Breaking into a high-level server isn't exactly child's play." "That's why we need you," Elena replied. "You're the only one who can do it." Sophie hesitated, her eyes narrowing. "And what's your role in this?" Elena's voice was steady. "I'll draw Nathan out. He's focused on me. I'll make sure he stays that way." Brick frowned. "Sounds like a suicide mission." "Not if we do it right," Elena said. "But we have to move fast." Gabe studied her, his gray eyes searching hers for any hint of deception. Finally, he nodded. "We do this together. No one gets left behind." The final play. The team moved with precision, each step of the plan executed like clockwork. Sophie hacked into Nathan's network from a remote location, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she bypassed layers of encryption. Liam acted as the getaway driver, ready to whisk them away at a moment's notice. Brick and Gabe provided security, their weapons at the ready. Elena, meanwhile, walked straight into the lion's den. She approached one of Nathan's secondary headquarters, her presence immediately drawing the attention of his men. "Well, well," Nathan said as she was brought before him. His tone was calm, but his eyes burned with intensity. "The prodigal thief returns." "I thought we should talk," Elena said, her voice even. "Face to face." Nathan smirked. "Brave. Or foolish?" "Maybe both," Elena replied. "But I have something you want." Nathan leaned back in his chair, studying her. "And what's that?" "Me," Elena said simply. "You've been chasing me for weeks. Here I am." Nathan's expression shifted, suspicion flickering across his face. "What's your game, Vega?" "No game," Elena replied. "Just a deal." Let the others go, and I'll tell you everything. As Nathan considered her words, Sophie's voice crackled through the team's earpieces. I'm in. 5 more minutes. Elena kept her expression neutral, though her heart raced. The next 5 minutes would determine everything. The climax. Sophie's infiltration triggered alarms throughout Nathan's network, forcing his team to scramble. Elena used the chaos to her advantage, slipping out of the room as Brick and Gabe launched a coordinated attack to extract her. The team converged at the getaway vehicle, with Liam flooring the gas as Nathan's men closed in. Bullets peppered the air, but the van sped away, disappearing into the night. The resolution. Back at their final safe house, the team regrouped. Sophie confirmed that Nathan's network had been compromised, their identities wiped from his system. For the first time in weeks, the weight of fear lifted slightly. Elena sat apart from the others, her gaze distant. Gabe approached her, his voice soft. You did good. Elena looked at him, her expression unreadable. We all did. As dawn broke, the team prepared to part ways, each heading in a different direction to start anew. Trust among thieves was fleeting, but in that moment, they were bound by something stronger: survival. Elena lingered a moment longer, watching as the others disappeared into the distance. Then, with a faint smile, she turned and walked away, the shadows of her past trailing behind her but no longer defining her. The game was over, but the players would never forget what it had cost them.